you so much for this. I apologize, it's been a mess. Zoom has had issues the whole day.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. So long as we don't get hacked and get some craziness going on. We've had that in a few meetings.
Well, let's make sure this doesn't happen, and we can jump straight into it then. But
Okay.
first of all, how are you doing?
Wow. Realizing that I need a PA in the house as well. It's 7 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock at night. So, and we're in curfew time. So of course I don't have my PA to help set everything up. But so far I've managed. I'm actually proud of myself that I've managed.
Yes, and I mean, a lot of the issues I think have been on our side. So again, apologies for this, but we're all here, which is what matters, and we can jump on board. So maybe
Exactly.
Laura is going to start the meeting, and maybe Laura, you can start with a quick intro and introduce a bit the topic.
100%. I think we're also live on Facebook, so we are ready to go. So everyone, welcome to our 5th virtual town hall event. Thank you for bearing with us. In particular, this event is going to be all about the impact of COVID-19 on women's rights and the importance of having more women in power. We're so excited to be hosting this event because as a global movement that is fighting to solve world issues, this pandemic concerns us all. And this is why we're so happy to be joined by Mrs. Passaris and discuss more in details about the impact that this pandemic will have on women, on women's rights, and how women leaders have demonstrated to be really better prepared to deal with this emergency. And just to give everyone a bit of background, as a considerable part of the world is still on lockdown, we're forced to consider once more the lack of preparation from a lot of countries in assisting those people that are most affected. In fact, we've seen that social distancing is a luxury that not everyone can afford. And this is also, if not especially, the case for women. We've seen that overall coronavirus is expected to bring back women's rights by decades, from healthcare resources being diverted to the economic repercussions on single households and jobs, and also to an increase in domestic violence. I think we all think that world leaders have often disregarded the role that gender plays in confronting crises like this, the current pandemic. And we think that gender should have a say on the specific crisis and how we deal with them. And who better prepared to do so than women and girls themselves. We've recently launched a campaign on women's rights to demand more gender parity in politics, and this is particularly the case because women make up only 24% of national legislative bodies around the world, and particularly in Kenya, they make up 22% of the National Assembly. So this is why we're so excited to have Mrs. Passaris joining us and bringing her perspective into this event. So Colombe, before we jump into the conversation, if you want to do a quick presentation of our guest.
It will be hard to do in just a couple of minutes, but I'll give you just the quick highlights then. So we're really excited, as Laura mentioned, to have you with us. Mrs. Passaris is a member of Parliament representing Nairobi County. And she's trying to define the role of women in Parliament, which is even more amazing for our event, as we'll be talking about this. And she's been an active advocate for women's rights all over her career. She's an active member of the Committee on Health and the Special Funds Account Committee, and she was awarded quite a few awards on women's rights. So we're thrilled to have you with us. And on the slide tech details, we have Andrea behind the little logo here that will be monitoring all of the questions. So for all of the attendees, feel free to ask the questions in the chat. Laura and I will pick them up and ask them. And we're also monitoring constantly Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and whatever other social media is out there to make sure we get all questions. So we can finally get to them. And we wanted to first ask you, Mrs. Passaris, about what it means for you to be defining the role of women in Parliament in Kenya, what the situation is like in Parliament.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Parliament. Okay, so I'm a first-time parliamentarian, and of course we had the Constitution enacted in 2010, which said that we should not have more than 1/3, not more than 2/3 of one gender, meaning that, you know, in every 9 elected members, there should be 3 women or 3 men, not more, you know, it should be 6, you know, you shouldn't have more than 6, and then the other gender is left out. So we've never been able to achieve that. You know, the men are very, very aggressive against implementing. This is the only part of the constitution that has not been implemented. We've had civil society going into courts. We've had interactions with the male parliamentarians, and we've never been able to get it. And that in itself is a problem, because when you don't have enough women, you can't push for issues that concern women. So we've realized that lobbying the men to try and implement a constitution, right? We hope that the courts will, you know, we were hoping that the courts will say that this has to be done. The matter is still in court, it's still going around in circles. But Parliament, you know, we do have a few men that are friendly towards women, but at the end of the day, when we want to push an agenda for women, we will never get enough men supporting it. And then also we have another problem in that Kenya is still very, very, even if we're a secular state, we're still very, very much controlled by the church. So a lot of the women's issues, you know, like the right to one's body, are finding it very hard to get through, because everybody then wants to be right in terms of religion rather than spirituality.
No, thank you for this. And I think, you know, it was one of our questions as well, to understand how come this part of the constitution hasn't been implemented yet. As you said, it's the only part. We saw that there's quotas. We as an organization believe that we should have whatever measures enable women to be in politics because of all of the barriers. And that, as you said, women are the only ones capable at the end of advocating for themselves and making sure that women's interests are represented.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, why hasn't it been done? It's because I think we didn't lack the proper commitment. You know, I mean, the president I was in Women Deliver in Vancouver, and the president talked about a lot of things that concern women. You know, like female genital mutilation, sanitary towels, a lot of things. But back home in Kenya, I think if we really made an effort to whip Parliament, both my political leader and the president, we would have probably been able to achieve at least not more than 2/3. The constitution should have been implemented. But the problem we're having right now is that not having been implemented, it's you know, we got exhausted. I think we got exhausted. And then there was a situation where, you know, there was a campaign called Punguza Mzigo, Pundai Machoka, which means reduce the load, and the donkey is tired. So that campaign was happening at the same time when we were fighting for more women to be in Parliament. So we were actually seen as a burden. And you find that society, even our voters, they look at women and they demand so much more from women. You know, the few women that we have, they're demanding so much more, and they're ready to discard them, rather than look at the fact that all these years they've probably been having less and less and less, and women have not been in power. But I think socially, I love the fact that the 5 women leaders who are being celebrated for excelling in COVID response is actually making people think that, yes, you know what, women can do this. Are we doing something wrong by just always backing a man rather than a woman? We've had 2 women run for presidency, and you know, it was tough for them. But the fact that they even stood up and ran for presidency, it's a good statement in itself. But we need the buy-in. Women are the majority. What are we not doing right to make sure that women understand that they need to vote women, and they don't judge us with the same platform that they judge men, because we don't have the resources that men have awarded themselves. Even when it comes to resources, they're very quick to make sure that they get the resources and we don't.
And you know, something that you just said now, that women make better leaders, leads very well to our next question. And it's more in general how the situation with the coronavirus is currently going in Kenya. And you know, we wanted to know more about how the pandemic has affected the country.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, you have to understand that we've got a lot of widows, we've got a lot of single parents. So why do you have a single parent? Because men are irresponsible. You know, even in our judicial processes, a woman is held responsible for having had the child. Nobody says, oh, why did you get pregnant? So you should look after your own child. Why are you coming to us and asking for maintenance? They don't realize that at the point when men and women were engaging, they were engaging because they were probably in love or having a relationship. So, you know, some of these things are so painful, you know, to talk about, because it's just insane that in this day and time, we're still trying to defend the woman's rights to have things. So we have a lot of single parents, and these single mothers are breadwinners, as well as running a household on their own with their children, you know, maybe 4 or 5 children. A woman has a disabled child, the man takes off. So now in the pandemic, you've got so many women that have lost their jobs, so many women that are not able to operate. And now without the income, the children are suffering because there's no 2 people earning income. So you find that, you know, we've always talked about single parenting, you know, how do we help the single mother? And then, of course, we've got a bulging youth that also has challenges. But I think right now, when you look at in terms of responsibility, the youth is on his own. He has only to care for himself. But the woman, the young woman who has 2 or 3 children, because we don't have family planning, we don't advocate for family planning. We're not pushing an agenda to ensure that women have children only when they want the child and when they're ready to have the child. When a young schoolgirl gets pregnant, she's forced to have the child because abortion is not permitted. Yet she didn't want to. I mean, the two-headed relationship, the young teenagers having sexual relationship, the girl gets to drop out of school, gets a baby, the boy continues all the way to university, and you know, he doesn't want her. He's, you know, he moves on. So we do have a challenge in that a lot, you know, the law is skewed against the woman. You know, we have to understand, you know, that the woman needs to be supported, needs to be educated, needs to be facilitated. If she does get pregnant, but she was only engaging in sex, she wasn't engaging in sex to have a child, you know, and then that responsibility, oh, she's raped. I mean, a woman who's, a young girl who's raped or defiled is forced to have a child, and then you find poverty just breeds poverty, and it continues. It's a vicious circle of wrongs.
No, completely. And I mean, what you just said, you know, we've seen this across the world. So in the US, I think Ohio and Texas came back on abortion rights during COVID because they believe that it's non-essential services. So we've seen countries across the world go back on women's rights as an excuse often to go back, citing COVID as, you know, there's more urgent things than guaranteeing basic rights and basic rights to your body and so on. And you also mentioned that it will be hard for women to go back to work because they lost their income and so on. And we saw with Ebola and Zika in the past that women had a harder time going back to work after the crisis was passed. We know that it's harder for women to get higher salaries and to get just equal pay across the world. What do you think could be done to ease post-coronavirus crisis, to make sure that women can go back in the workplace, to make sure that they have access to equal pay and that they are not in this situation anymore?
You know, I have a sister who lives in the UK and she works as a chef. And, you know, I spoke to her and she's getting £1,000 every month to help her survive this period of unemployment where everything is locked down. The Kenya government has really tried in the sense that, you know, we're giving persons with disability, the ones that are registered with the ministry, we're giving them some stipend so that they can be able to at least put food on the table. We're looking after the very old people, you know, the aged. And then we're also looking at the vulnerable. But then the biggest problem is, I mean, even if you look at Nairobi, where the capital city, we have 4 million people, assuming that even just a very low figure of 1 million people are displaced right now in terms of employment and income generating activities, we are only able to provide about 25,000, between 20 and 25,000 jobs where the government is getting people, the youth to work, and they're being paid something like $6 a day, and then a few are getting the allowance every month. But the problem is it's just a drop in the ocean. It's not everybody. I mean, every single day my phone has not less than 50 messages of people asking me for food. And then the government has now decided that we don't want to provide food, We want to give people the cash so that that can continue spurring up the economy, where they can go and buy the vegetables from someone. I love that. That's a World Food Program solution. They came up with this, that, you know, instead of providing people with food, let's give them the money, then they will go into their economies and buy the food. So the government's got the right agenda, but I think we need so much more money to be able to cater for all this. Now, I've got a fund, which I'm going to be trying now to meet the women groups and give them as much money as possible. But I don't think Kenya has the might of the US or the UK, where we will be able to really cushion everyone. So we're going to have poverty really increasing, depression going up again, suicides going up, domestic violence. It's all, you know, it's a vicious circle, because everything, one makes the other one go round, you know. I mean, it's going to be really tough times. And I think if government could find a way to cushion families, as opposed to thinking about putting in another road. The road can wait. We've done without the road for years. Why do we need the road right now? Can you take that money for the infrastructure and put it to ensuring that the women and the youth and the children are sustained? We leave no one behind. And that is going, you know, we're doing the budgets right now. And, you know, I mean, I'm in the health committee, and I'm just thinking, I mean, universal healthcare. Today we were discussing that the government needs to give the Kenyatta National Hospital the 7 billion shillings that it needs back in its kitty, which is the result of all the bills they've had to write off because people cannot afford to pay for universal healthcare. They don't have medical insurance. So that's another intervention, because we have to try and offer health. You know, nobody's going to be able to pay the National Hospital Insurance Fund. We're not going to be able to grow it, and hospitals are going to have to give more waivers. So while we've done that in the past, we need to cushion these institutions, because otherwise they'll collapse. So in the health committee, we're looking at these serious issues, because we know that people will not be able to afford the basics, you know, whether it's food, whether it's school uniform for their children, whether it's books for their children, whether, you know, the schools may be free, but even the transport to get to school. So I think every ministry is going to really have to look at the interventions that they will need to do, and all geared to uplifting people from poverty and sticking to the SDGs, you know, the 17 SDGs. Yeah. Leave no one behind.
Completely. And just, Laura, I know you had a question, but you mentioned food, and you mentioned access to food and so on. And I was reading recently about the fact that, you know, for a lot of children, the main meals, and for a lot of single mothers, the way to provide food for children is through school. So by having their children attend school, there's a canteen that is cheaper. They can actually have access to a proper meal and so on. Is the government putting in place any type of alternative measures to make sure that children across Kenya have access to proper meals?
Okay, we have a big problem in that we were upgraded into a middle income country. Now, with that upgrade for a middle income status, meant that World Food Program pulled out a lot of these programs that they had in the school. And you will find that was, you know, fine, we may be a middle income country, and whatever parameters they use to determine that we're a middle income, but the fact is poverty is still biting. Most of the families, the children in school, you would see them, they will get a meal and they will pack some of it to take home. So we know that poverty is real. So I feel that we will have to find a program that ensures that schools continue to have food. For, you know, we have a lot of civil society that tries to fill in the gaps, a lot of private sector. Kenya's private sector is really vibrant in terms of helping, but we need a structured system that makes sure that every school that cannot afford to give their children food is given assistance either by state, by the donor, or by the civil society.
Makes a lot of sense.
And yeah, completely. And you know, the one thing that you said, and also I think that you come in with an amazing perspective by being in the health committee, is to what extent this, you know, this coronavirus pandemic is only a health crisis, and, you know, to what extent can gender play a role in it, and, you know, women can have a stronger say on this pandemic, and, you know, what is going to come next and the solution that we can bring on.
I think the coronavirus, I mean, when I look at the Spanish flu and I look at, I mean, we had Zika. I don't know why the world should have, when we had SARS and Zika, I think we should have thought about what, and Ebola, we should have been thinking already about this. And I think there's been discussions about a pandemic, but I think it caught everyone with their pants down. And nobody seemed to have been prepared for this, So the question is, the interventions on this are going to be, they're going to have to be task forces and sit downs. But the fact is, we can't talk for too long. We've got to provide the action. So each and every ministry has to look at what is the impact of COVID, right, in terms of the budgets that we've spent on COVID response and normalcy. Because even in the health committee, we have other things. We've got TB, we've got cancer, we've got diabetes, we've got hypertension, we've got mental health. We've got all these other elements, accidents, road carnage. So you can't just focus on COVID and forget that you've got other things that you have to deal with, inoculations, vaccinations. So I feel that as a country, we need to be a bit more proactive. I raised a question in Parliament that, look, the schools are closed. We were supposed to have sanitary towels for all our students. The girls are still getting their menstruation. The fact that they're in their homes, are we going to reach them now and give them the sanitary towels? So the ministry said that the sanitary towels arrived before we had the curfews and we sent the students home. So we're still trying to confirm, is it true that all the children got their sanitary towels? Because if they got their 1 year supply, then that worked. If they didn't, how can we get it to the schools and to the girls? Because they might not be in school, they're homeschooled right now, right, online, but at the end of the day, they're still getting their menstruation. If we were providing the sanitary towels as government, we can't stop now because of COVID. When you look at online learning, we still have children that cannot be reached. And that's why we're saying, if you're going to have the examinations, right, you have to make sure that every child had the same opportunity to prepare. You can't compare a child who lives in Nairobi, who probably has access, majority of my children in Nairobi also don't have access to the internet. You can't assume everyone has a radio. So again, every ministry is going to have to.
Sorry, for some reason you are muted.
Oops, sorry.
It's working again.
I know. I forgot to. I should have closed incoming calls, but I was using a hotspot, so it's all madness. Whenever I go off, I'll come back again.
Perfect. What you just said, just as a side note, before we go back to the questions, the fact that Kenya has free sanitary products for school children is something that I personally find amazing. I'm from France. It's something we no way close it. Our taxes are at 5.5% on menstrual products. So like having this is already amazing on Kenya's side, but we definitely, it's necessary.
But we're not providing it for every child, but the thing is, it's good to celebrate what you're doing. We're providing it to public schools. We're not providing it to community-based schools, and the community-based schools are even poorer than the public schools. So there is a gap, and that's why in our fund, and there's so many civil societies that are also trying to fill in the gap. I think in a developing country, it's all hands on deck. Everybody has to do something, and the only thing is we have to have such a coordination so we don't duplicate, and we don't all focus in one area. We're all able to spread our wings and cover everyone.
Thank you for this. I just want to jump quickly on some of the questions we received in the chats, and two of them are more or less linked. So Claudio said that the constitution is not applied in its entirety when it comes to quotas for women. So he asked, what are the lessons learned and what's next for Kenyan women in politics? And I'll add to this question another question we got on social media quickly because it's very similar. It's how difficult has it been to reach a political position as a woman in a country like Kenya?
Okay, I'll start with the last one. I tried politics 4 times. I got in on the 4th time. The first time I was supposed to be a mayor for Nairobi, and sometimes I feel like it's such a loss of as a woman. I feel that I'm 56 this year. I feel like I lost so much opportunity to thrive and to lead, as a woman. So I was a businesswoman, and so I didn't become the mayor. Then I went in and ran for a member of parliament in a very, very hostile place. And of course, I was rigged out and played played by men who I had in my campaign team. So of course, I lost the seat there. And of course, I've spent a lot of resources, spent 10 million trying to become mayor, 10 million to try and become a member of parliament in 2008. Then I went to run for women rep in 2013. And again, I didn't win because it was party politics. You had to be in a strong party with the wave, political party. A woman who wants to run, I was going to run for governor as an independent. And then when I did the maths, there was no way I could afford it. There was no way I could afford to have agents all over Nairobi. So I backed down and eventually rejoined ODM. ODM is a very, very strong party. I was a member of ODM before, and I had moved out in 2013. So I rejoined ODM, and that really, really helped, being in a strong, structured party with networks all over. But politics is very expensive. The political party gives you a ticket, you pay for your ticket, they invest because you campaign with your presidential candidate. I mean, your presidential candidate or your party leader coming to your constituency or your county really swings the votes for you as well. But in all honesty, it's going to be tougher and tougher for women, because most of the donors who want to support women advancement in politics want to train us on how to be leaders. We keep telling them, it's not about training us. We already know how to be leaders. What we need is visibility. Visibility means we need t-shirts. When the men are giving t-shirts, we need to have the t-shirts. When they're giving hats, we need to have the hats. When they're having town hall meetings, we need to have the town hall meetings. When they're moving around with 5 cars branded and lots of people in their team, we need to have the same. Now, most women fail because of visibility. They're not able to come out. And that's why I encourage every woman that wants to go into politics, get into a strong political party. Don't try and waste your resources unless you've got a lot of money, a strong political party so that you can ride the wave. I mean, I was running with ODM. We were campaigning together with the governor, the senator, and it made things easier.
That's really insightful. I was just to jump on this before Laura tells you the next question. It's really insightful, and it always really pisses me off personally so I run for an election myself, didn't make it, but run as well. And when people try to explain that it's about training you and not about all of the inherent barriers that are in your way, because it's a man's world. And instead of trying to destroy this and make sure you have the same visibility, the same funds, no discrimination and so on, it's about you changing the way you behave. It's gets under my skin.
You know what I've done right now? I've identified a number of women who I want them to run in 2022. And what I'm doing is I'm letting them use my office to serve their communities. So what's happening is these women who want to be leaders, if I'm going to distribute sanitary towels, I will give them sanitary towels. They will go door to door. They will give it. So we have to have a strategy where we take women under our wing and we try to build them. The County Assembly of Nairobi, the County Assembly of Nairobi has 85 seats. Out of the 85 seats, only 5 women were elected. While we celebrate those 5 women, what is 5? It's not even 10%. And then the majority, to make the not more than 2/3 in the counties it's working, they bring nominated. Nominated, you get your salary, you have no agenda, you're not given a budget to do anything. So you will never be able to go and compete with the 80 men who won the seats. So and right now, I mean, I know that the county has no shelters. No shelters. I mean, we talk about domestic violence with COVID. Nairobi County has no shelters. In fact, most of the counties in the country have no shelters that they've put up. We've got few shelters put up by survivors of sexual gender-based violence or by donors or civil society, but we don't have a shelter put for domestic violence by the county assembly. And now when you're looking for me, if I'm looking for land is another big issue. So we really have a problem, because right now, you just imagine a woman will call in the hotline and say, oh, I've been raped, or I've been beaten, I need to go somewhere. We don't have the infrastructure to take her. Most of the places are congested and they're struggling because they don't get support from the government because they're NGOs. So we need more women so that the women can address the issues relating to women. When it comes to empowerment, when it comes to protection, when it comes to financial management, opportunities in jobs, or manufacturing, the government has an agenda, food security, manufacturing. universal health care, and housing. So we hope that even when the government is going to be giving housing, it will be giving 70% to women, because like in Greece they have a law. My father's Greek, so in Greece they have a law that before a woman gets married, she should have a house, so that if she gets married and the man moves into her house, if something were to go wrong, the man moves out, the woman is not left on the streets. So I feel that that is something that African countries should do, because it's so sad to have a woman call you and tell you she's been kicked out of her house. Why? Because the man is the owner of the house. So we're having a housing project. I hope women will be the first priority in terms of being given the keys for houses.
And that's before I even ask a question, I want to say that it's such a great point, because I think that we've seen with this pandemic, and this is something that we've said a lot, is that it is in part a health crisis, but it's so much more than that. And see the impact that is having on women. And when government are saying we need to implement a lockdown, for many women the house is the least safest place. And what you said about this is it exactly puts together our point. I wanted to jump on another questions that we got from Facebook, and it is, how can we inspire more women to participate in politics with all these hurdles ahead? And it's related to my question on in what kind of barriers do girls from young age have to deal with in Kenya?
Okay, so how do we encourage more women to get into politics? By trying to, the government recently did something. They came up with a book called The Trailblazer, and the UN also came up with the book celebrating 50 women. So I'll tell you what, by celebrating women leaders. Now, I'll tell you, social media, especially Kenyans on Twitter, can be really, really nasty. When it comes to attacking a woman, I mean, they go down. I mean, just this week, I had to go to the DCI, the Director of Criminal Investigation, to file a complaint because on Mother's Day, I wake up to an article on social media, circulating on WhatsApp, where somebody saying that they were my employee, they worked for me, I got pregnant with them, and then I went off to India when I went to do my spine surgery and aborted. Now, I am pro-choice, okay? So I'm pro-choice, and it's known that I'm pro-choice. So the anti-abortion crusaders, of course, probably have put this whole story together. But you see, it's demeaning. It's always making a woman look like the only thing she has of value is between her legs. I always tell people I have more between my ears than between my legs. So stop always going there and trying to make it look like that's the only thing I have to offer and that's the only thing I'm good for. So a lot of women will be very scared. And then they always ask this question, so is she married? Who is she married to? I don't even see how that is relevant. If I can lead, whether I'm married, whether I'm divorced, whether I'm single. So there's always been judgmental ways of looking at women. And I think it's scared a lot of people into politics, but we've become hard knock. We've become hard knock.
I think, a perfect way to end it. We are so happy then to count you in this campaign. We could not agree more. We want 50% at every level of government, in national assemblies, parliaments. We want more women presidents across the world. And we are definitely very, very thankful that you are leading this battle with us. I think you've been inspiring a whole lot of people, including in this live. So thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. God bless. Take care.
Have a good evening.